Welcome to Implementing IDDSI in 3 Easy Steps. My name is Maggie Roche. Thank you for registering and being here today. Before we dive into the program, let me give you a little bit about a background on me. I'm a registered dietitian with a master's degree in clinical nutrition. I'm board certified in gerontological nutrition, a specialist in diabetes, as well as a fellow of the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics. And probably more importantly is that I believe in the transformative power of nutrition, particularly for older adults. And in the 30 years since I founded Roche Dietitians, my mission has been to educate and empower those who nourish older adults. I have a suggestion, and that is, let's start with purees. All of us are already serving purees, and here's the guidelines for the puree. And what happens is we need to first of all know that this is puree, the number 4, the letter green. And what's different is that we have an abbreviation, PU4. We need to make sure that our purees fall off the spoon in a single spoonful when tilted, meaning they're not sticky. We also have to make sure that liquids must not separate from solid. Some of these other characteristics, they have to be smooth, let's see, no lumps, all of that we already are doing with our purees. And here is the fork drip test. We need to hold it up on the fork and make sure there's not like this long trail of thin liquids coming through, dolloping through the bottom. And then we also have to make sure it's not sticky, and that's demonstrated here. But at the same time, let me show you this. This is peanut butter, and this is super sticky, and this is a fail. So at the same time, though, we have to maintain what we're doing with our current purees. We have people that we're serving purees to. So I'm going to suggest that we start IDDSI by implementing just the pureed level. Why? Again, you're already serving purees. You've got the diet orders. You're not going to change your terminology. You might be changing your terminology when it comes to the textured modified or mechanical soft or chopped or ground or all those other levels, but let's just get started with the purees. You've got your diet orders, you've got your recipes. They might not be perfect, but you've got recipes. You've got an extension line that says purees on your menus. There's a familiarity. We're starting with what we know. And clinically, it's very similar in terms of what the people who are on purees now are going to do well on an IDDSI puree. What are the benefits of starting with your purees? And by the way, you can do this today. You begin an understanding of the framework. You can get this poster, this graphic from IDDSI.org today, print it up on a color printer, and start just hanging it up in your kitchens. Circle the pureed part and say to everybody, this is what we're going to be looking at. So we're getting familiar with that framework. We're going to learn the names, the colors, the abbreviations. So we've got something to talk about, and it's in a very simple, attainable way. Then we're going to introduce the testing methods, because that's a new concept for our teams. Then we'll gain some confidence around it. And more importantly, or as importantly, you'll get a buzz going. Now, because at some point, we're going to have to take this beyond dining. Folks in dining are very good at pulling things off by themselves. We could serve 500 at one meal, right? We can make stuff happen. You could do a cookout for 1,000. But IDDSI is not one of those things. IDDSI is going to take an interdisciplinary approach. And by the way, I have a blog article that we just posted for hospital dietitians and for long-term care dietitians on implementing IDDSI in all levels of IDDSI. And it really breaks it down to 5 steps. And so once you get past this, you can get into the other levels, and it gets a little bit more involved, and you need to go interdisciplinary. But right now, by starting this way, 1, when the surveyors come knocking on your door, you can show them that you've started the process. And 2, it gives your team a chance to wrap their head around it. So what are the 3 steps? 1, test where you are. Get a fork out, get a spoon out. You could do this today and just show folks, this is where we are. This is an example of 2 things passing. And these are real life examples. But you're also going to find out things like this, things that don't work. And I'll explain these pictures in a second. But basically, you're trying to learn the techniques for testing. IDDSI has an audit tool that shows you it's literally a checklist on how to test for items. And one of the things on the audit tool, on the bottom of the audit tool, is if you can pick up a pureed foods with your hands, it's no longer a pureed food. And this is something that we've done in the past with purees because it's smooth. This is a cake that was made with gelatin, and we can still do slurries of gelatin, but it just can't be that firm. Because think about it, if you pick that up, you have to do something with it in your mouth, right? We have to be able to manipulate it, bite it off, somehow get that in our mouth. So that's technically a fail. Even though if you put the fork on it, you know, you'd be able to smash it down and it would stay down, etc. So you're going to learn some of these things as you go, and that's okay. But guess what? You saved a risky situation by having your whole team understand, all right, I did the test on this and it failed. The other picture is a picture of food I made. These are all foods that passed the test. But when you first of all, the coloring was wrong. The plate's beautiful, the plate itself. But you learn also about things like piping and layering. I was going to need a little bit more thickener in order to do that. So by starting with testing, it takes you to another level of learning about your pureed foods. It also gets you starting a conversation with your teams about each of us has a role. And in our IDDSI training, we work it around the theme of we test for safety, because everyone on the team has a role in your department as well as other departments. Everyone has a role in keeping those we serve safe from choking. So again, it brings the team in. We get to practice what the ideal is, and most importantly, we foster independent decision making. So that's an important point about just getting started by testing. You've got the conversation going. Even if you have fails, they've at least had the example of what the ideal is. So that's step one, test where you are. Step two is train your team. Make sure they understand the why, that they know what dysphagia is, that they know where pureed is, that it's green, it's there, it's number 4, and this is the abbreviation. They know that there's something called a spoon tilt test. They know that there's a fork drip test and an appearance test where we're looking for separate thin liquids. These are the types of simple things that we can train our teams on to get ourselves implementing IDDSI by next week. Here's an example, and these are from pictures that I have from our training programs, and I'll show you those after our 30 minutes is up. But we want to train our teams to look at our purees. Here's a fail. This puree has separate thin liquids. We want them to be able to use the fork drip test. This is specifically for purees. That's a pass. And that's a beautiful pass on the spoon tilt test. The other part about training is that you're going to need some kind of a visual reminder. The picture that you see here in the foreground is a poster that you can download for free from IDDSI. You'd be in business today. In the background, and I'll show you in a little bit more detail, is one of our posters that we put together to help folks understand about IDDSI testing. Testing should happen pre-meal. You know, part of your pre-meal experience should be IDDSI testing. Again, it gives them an opportunity to get the basics of IDDSI down before we get into a more detailed implementation of level 5 and 6. And, you know, even easy to chew would be another one to start with as well, because that's a simple one. And it empowers independence. And remember that initial polling question I asked you, how confident are you that those purees are going to be safe when you're not there completely independently? And I think this is a wonderful thing about IDDSI and getting your team trained, is that you're going to empower independence. So here is this poster. I'm showing it to you on its own. Oops, I'm sorry, hold on. there's the poster, and this poster was broken up by the level. So you can see in the upper left-hand corner, it's the pureed tests. Upper right is minced and moist, soft and bite-sized lower left, and easy to chew, which is a very easy test, is on the bottom right. I'm going to show it to you from this format, and this is another poster that we have, but I broke it up for you. These are the things that our teams are going to start learning about. First of all, we're always using our eyes. We're looking at things. We want to make sure, and I have level 3 there, but many of you probably don't use that, but I included level 3 because level 3 is good to know when it comes to gravies, that we know if a gravy is the appropriate thickness at level 3. That's the that second row, the fork drip test, the picture of the tomato sauce is passing. These are all passes except for when we say no. But under the pureed appearance, we're looking for separate thin liquids, minced and moist, and soft and bite size. We're looking for size. And then we've got the fork drip test, which we use just for liquidized, meaning gravies, probably practically for our purposes, as well as purees. Spoon tilt test is used for level 4 pureed and minced and moist. And then the fork pressure test we use for 5, 6, and 7. So that gives you a sense of an overview of where the testing, and if your team can see these things visually as part of your daily organization, posters and such, it'll help reinforce the concepts.
The third test for pureed foods is the spoon tilt test, which tests for stickiness. To complete the spoon tilt test, simply take a small amount of pureed food on your spoon. Check to see if the pureed food holds shape on the spoon, and then tilt the spoon to see if it easily slides off. If the pureed food easily slides off your spoon when tilted or gently flicked, it passes the spoon tilt test. If a lot of residue is left on the spoon, the matte pureed food fails the spoon tilt test. However, a thin film where you can see the spoon through the film or a small amount of residue is okay.
Okay, so that was an example of some of the training that we do on IDDSI that's available to you that just makes it very clear to the teams on how to do the testing. So that was step 2, train your team. Step 1, figure out where you are now. 2, train your team. And then step 3 is start fixing your purees. So you're going to identify some challenges. I'll tell you what your challenges are right now. You're going to have problems with rice. You're going to have a problem with pasta being sticky. We have to figure out a way to put gravies and sauces in with those items so that they don't stick to the spoon as much. But so you'll identify your challenges. Then you're going to research your fixes. And sometimes it's as simple as, oh, we need to use a little bit more thickener or a little bit more liquid. That will depend on your recipes. But now your teams are going to understand that finesse because they're going to have the fork and the spoon right there when they're making it to see how well they do. Then, of course, we have to test again right before service because if we're holding it for any period of time, thickeners change consistency over time, right? And temperature, the temperature of the food. And so they're going to learn how, the finesse of the purees. And for us to spend some time doing this before we get into our IDDSI levels, other levels, that's important. And we can have the best recipes in the world, but we all know this. It depends on the food that day. And we have to make sure that we get that finesse of testing the foods and understanding how it fits in. And then this is the other important part of it, is that we're going to want to taste the food. And people are going to be more willing to taste the food. They understand the why, they understand what they're doing, they know what the goal is. And then, of course, presentation. And I'm going to show you a slide that's going to be really interesting to you because this is something that happened that I did not expect to happen. But this is what happens. When you start getting, and this was done by chefs who work in long-term care. And we had a group of them that we brought together and we introduced IDDSI, but we also said, this is how we want to focus on our purees. We want to focus on appearance. Now, I brought a ricer that day, and we also had a piping bag, and the item on the right is not a mold. And that's, I've got a thing about molds because molds always don't get the portion right. They scooped up their portion of the ground pork, Again, we're not using gravies on top, no liquids that separate. You know, gravies technically have to be the same consistency of a puree, so why bother? So we integrate gravies in with the meat when we're pureeing it, but they did do that, they used a kitchen bouquet or liquid smoke to make those grill marks. But look at that, isn't that beautiful what they came up with? By the way, that's a commercially available rice product. That's why it passed the spoon tilt test. But this is what happens when you give people ownership to it. And so here's the piping bags on the right. On the left is another example of meat, that's breakfast sausage, and that's pureed. And I didn't even think that you could do this, but that's literally pureed eggs. But they again didn't use a mold, just a spatula to spread it out onto the plate. Okay, so when you fix your purees, beautiful things happen. So now I have one more point I'd like to make, and that is creating a safety culture. It's important for us to connect what we're doing with IDDSI to safety. Once you've done these 3 steps of getting your purees going, you've talked about IDDSI in your department, you can start recruiting your clinical team. Also enlist a champion. Typically that's an administrator, somebody who cares about safety and quality. Of course, that's our executive directors and administrators, and they can champion the rest of IDDSI implementation with you. And we can borrow from other safety cultures. You know, this is that example. I have the picture of these guys here because how many of us have gone by construction sites or industrial sites where they say so many days since an accident. So it's that type of culture where it's part of their behaviors. So that includes signage, vocabulary, there could be rewards involved, and it's a consistent message throughout the entire organization. And there is such a thing as patient safety. But there's a difference between a safety program that talks about forms and protocols and tools versus a safety culture that talks about how a group thinks, how a group behaves, and being part of the group is what forms the behavior. And so just to reiterate, what we want to do is we want to focus on purees, talk about the spoon tilt test, the fork drip test, the appearance tests, and make sure our teams understand it and they understand the why.
That's why our theme for this course is We Test for Safety. Once it becomes part of our regular practice, testing will only take a few extra seconds. So we need to take the time now to learn all about IDDSI and understand each of our roles in helping to keep those we serve safe.
All right, and so that's part of the theme that I always include in our training to make sure that people understand that they're part of this and that there is a why. So here's your calls to action. Know the why. The quality and the safety is the why. Start with purees. Test where you are now. Train your team on IDDSI purees. Start fixing your purees, and all kinds of wonderful things will happen. Build an IDDSI culture. Get your dietitian involved now and start thinking about who your champion is. But the 3 steps are test where you are, train your team, and start fixing your purees. And you can do that today.